Hi there, I'm Robert Holt. I'm a large animal veterinarian with Mount Baker Veterinary up in Linden, Washington, the far northwest corner of Washington State. And we just wanted to put together some information for horse owners. We've been getting a number of client calls and concerns with the EHM outbreak that has been going on in the last few days. And so we wanted to provide resource for accurate information, because there is some misinformation that is getting spread on social media, and so it's important to know the actual current situation and recommendations for moving forward.
So what is this virus that is creating so much concern within the horse community, and where did it come from?
So the virus itself is equine herpes virus 1, and it is a pretty ubiquitous virus present in the equine population, just like respiratory viruses for humans. They're kind of always around and being spread from person to person, causing upper respiratory type disease. And the big concern with this one is that occasionally EHV-1, rather than just causing respiratory signs, can take the form of EHM, which is where it affects the central nervous system, brain and spinal cord, and you can have horses that are severely neurologically impaired and can either die or need to be euthanized, and that is what's causing such a big concern with this one. So far as where the virus came from, like I said, it's always present and circulating in horse populations. And just like viruses that humans have, we can have point mutations that occur as that virus is being replicated that change how that virus behaves. And so in this particular situation, it appears that there was a shift in this virus to allow it to be more of a have more of a predilection for the neurologic form, so more likely to cause EHM neurologic symptoms rather than just the EHV-1 respiratory symptoms that we typically see. Additionally, EHV-1 can, in some situations, also cause abortion in pregnant mares, and so that's a consideration as well.
So what are the stats as of right now?
So,
and what's today's date and
so
time?
Today is the 21st of November, about 5 p.m., and I just checked again, and in the last 3 hours, the number of confirmed cases in Texas has increased by 3. There are currently 11 confirmed EHM cases with neurologic symptoms in Texas. In Oklahoma, there is 1 case of EHV-1 positive with no neurologic signs and 3 EHM cases with neurologic signs. Louisiana has 3 confirmed EHM cases with neurologic signs. Colorado has 1 case of EHM with neurologic signs, and New Mexico has 1 EHM case with neurologic signs. However, this outbreak seems to have stemmed from the WPRA finals and elite barrel race down in Waco, Texas, November 5th through 9th. And apparently there were at least horses from at least 28 different states at that event. And so as those horses that potentially may have been exposed at that event spread back across the country, there's great chance for this virus to be spread widely throughout the U.S. and to affect other horses where those horses were exposed at the show go to. And so that's why we wanted to get some of this information out.
So we've had a lot of phone calls constantly about this from some of our clients that have boarding facilities with multiple horses, and other farriers also have been calling you. So some of these questions are, if a horse was possibly exposed, what should I do? Should I call my vet? Go to Facebook? What should I do?
So if you have a horse that you feel may have been exposed specifically at this event, not only call your vet, it would be a good idea to call the state veterinarian to coordinate with them. But yes, it would be a good idea to call your veterinarian to get specific advice. But in general, if you have a horse that you feel may have been exposed, you should definitely immediately isolate that horse, which means physical separation from other horses by both distance and physical barrier. You should practice very stringent biosecurity, meaning that personnel that care for that horse should have extensive disinfection in between handling that horse or taking care of that horse, and other horses preferentially have separate personnel completely if possible. It's important to realize that humans can be a way of transmitting this virus from horse to horse, either on our hands, on tack, clothing. All of those methods and more are ways of feed of transmitting the virus from a horse that is infected and shedding to susceptible horses. And so in addition to that, that horse that has potentially been exposed should be having a rectal temperature taken at least twice a day. And it's a good idea to know where the baseline of that particular horse's temperature is, because in a conference call that we had last night with the AAEP,
What is AAEP?
the American Association of Equine Practitioners, they had a webinar last night with some information on it, and even if a horse maybe doesn't go above 101.5, which is what we would typically call a fever, if you have a horse that typically runs at 99 degrees and you're temping them twice a day, and then all of a sudden one time you go to temp them and now that temperature is up at 101, and typically that horse runs at 99, that is significant, because that's the kind of increase that we can see with this particular virus, and that may be a significant sign that the horse is actually infected. And so at that point we would want to do some diagnostic testing for doing PCR testing to actually show that the virus is present either in the nasal secretions of the horse, or it's also a good idea to do a blood test to check for what's called viremia, which is where we have virus particles circulating through the blood of the horse. And so the recommendation for monitoring is extreme biosecurity with isolation of suspected horses that have been exposed, and at least twice a day rectal temperature monitoring. And again, contact your veterinarian to get other or more specific recommendations.
So what can we do as a horse community to stop the spread?
So the state veterinarian for Washington sent out an information sheet the other day, and their recommendations, exposed horses, for horse owners, exposed horses should be isolated for at least 21 days after the last known exposure. Restricted access to other horses, avoid sharing equipment, personnel, use protective barriers, doing the temperature monitoring, watch for respiratory signs such as nasal discharge or coughing, also watch for clinical signs of any neurologic deficits such as inability to stand, difficulty walking, lethargy, or urine dribbling. And then the other thing that they recommend, and is helpful especially in an outbreak situation like this, is limiting horse movements during an outbreak can really help to stop the spread and to allow this virus to die away so that it doesn't keep getting larger and larger. And so the recommendation is that event organizers should consider cancellation or postponement of events to stop continued spread of the disease. And if an event is going to take place, their recommendation from the state in their information they had sent out is that the organizers would require health certificates completed within the last 72 hours to allow horse entry into that event. And so by postponing some of these events, that can help us to limit the spread. So one of the things with this particular disease that's important to realize is that the horses that do come down with EHM, the neurologic form of the disease, oftentimes by the time those horses present with clinical signs of neurologic deficits, those horses have been viremic and have been actively shedding virus for at least 7 to 10 days already. And so that can produce a lot of exposed horses if you're continuing to have horse movement going on, going to shows, coming in and out of boarding facilities and that kind of thing. Before the horse ever shows any clinical sign of disease, they can have been shedding the virus for 7 to 10 days already. And so in that way, it can really cause the spread of the disease. And so limiting movements and limiting some of these functions where horses are going to be commingled is an important part of helping to reduce the spread of this disease. It's also important to realize that right now, many states, including I got a notification from Montana, they have discontinued the Equine extended CVI, which is a 6-month health certificate, if you will, where the owners are able to self-report their movements. Montana has discontinued the function of that and are requiring a health certificate done within the last 72 hours to allow entry into Montana to make sure those horses would be healthy coming in. So various states are going to be implementing different movement restrictions that are going to be considerably more tighter than they have been in the past as long as this outbreak continues. And so I didn't touch on this before, but just like us with respiratory, the spread of this particular virus is through aerosolized drops, nasal discharge, and so those are the types of things where nose-to-nose contact or through what are called fomites, which can be humans. If we get the nasal discharge or those respiratory secretions on our hands, and we can transmit that from one horse to another to be the mechanism of spread from horse to horse. One question that does come up is, should we vaccinate for EHV? And so EHV is the respiratory form, and it's a good idea to have horses vaccinated for that to help prevent respiratory illness. However, no EHV-1 vaccine has been shown to be able to prevent the neurologic form of the disease, the EHM. And so vaccinating for the EHV-1 does not necessarily mean that the horse could not get EHM. However, it is a good idea to have horses vaccinated for EHV-1 to limit the chances of them coming down with the disease to begin with, and also to help to limit the shedding. If a horse does come down with it, they're less likely to shed or will shed for a shorter period of time. There is actually some indication that if you had a horse that you thought maybe had been exposed, if you vaccinated that horse right away, that actually may make it more likely that they would get the EHM version of the disease, although that has not been proven one way or the other, but there's been some suggestion of that. And so if in the face of a stressful event or potential exposure, I wouldn't recommend vaccination. However, in general, if you don't think your horse has been exposed, but just they're due for a booster for their EHV-1, a flu rhino type booster, it would be a good idea to go ahead and get that boosted now if you don't feel there's been an actual exposure at this point.
So a question that somebody might have, if they're your client and the 5-way that you provide that we do all the time, is that included in that vaccine?
So EHV-1
protection.
is one of the viruses that is covered in a typical 5-way vaccine, and my personal recommendation is usually that a horse should have a 5-way annually, and horses that are, traveling, going to multiple shows, and that kind of thing, where their risk of exposure is higher, it's a good idea to then at the 6-month interval go ahead and do a booster with just the flu rhino component to help boost those antibodies, which may be helpful in limiting the chances of that horse coming down with EHV-1. And like I said before, if they were to come down with it, limits the clinical signs of the disease and may help to prevent spread or shedding.
So Amy G, who owns Kelly Park Stables, is a friend and a client. We've had multiple conversations with her about this, and she's got 40 plus horses in her barn. A handful of kids participate in Wasset and go to practices at another barn, commingling with a lot of animals. How do you feel? Tell everybody what the conversations we've had with Amy and your recommendations for that.
So while the information that we've gotten from the state so far is that we don't have any known exposed horses in Washington, and we have no confirmed cases in Washington, the risk is certainly there that horses that were at that event could have traveled back, or horses that were at that event have been moved other places and exposed other horses that then could have come back to Washington. So again, restriction of movement in this type of an outbreak is an important part of helping to limit the spread of the disease so that we can all move past this. And so in that situation, if I were a barn owner such as Amy, in order to help to protect that barn and to protect the interests of those kids that have their horses boarding there, I would recommend not allowing horses to be coming in and out, going to those events where they're commingling with other horses for the time being while this outbreak is going on. And in addition, if there are any new horses coming into a boarding stable situation like that, I would strongly encourage them to isolate all new arrivals, require a health certificate within the last 72 hours for any new horses coming in, and once they showed up, to isolate those horses for at least 14 days. The state, they recommended 21 days in theirs. I would recommend at least 14 days of isolation after a new horse arrived. And that's just going to help to protect all of the other boarders and horses at that barn, and again, try and limit the spread of this disease so we can get past it faster.
So where can I get the most up-to-date information?
So 2 sources of really good information that I would recommend to folks is to visit the American Association of Equine Practitioners, and there is a organization that AEP partners with that's called the Equine Disease Communication Center, EDCC. And so you can go online to the EDCC to get updated, verified, confirmed case numbers or case counts, know what the situation is of disease that has been verified, and is a better source of information than things like Facebook or other social media, where things sometimes can get blown out of proportion or misinformation put out there. And so I would recommend that clients go to the EDCC or AAEP websites, and then additionally, AAEP and EDC are going to be hosting a horse owner education webinar coming up at 5 p.m. on November 25th, and so I would encourage folks to plan on joining in that webinar to get information and the most recent update on what's going on with this outbreak at that time. So again, that's November 25th at 5 p.m. And you can just go to the EDCC or the AAP website to get more information about that as that comes out.
And then every couple days, we're gonna try and do a little video of just the latest. So
Yeah,
that
we'll
people
try
can-
to update just so that you have some more information as the situation develops, when it makes sense to try and provide more information.